I wasn't dating him. My family was. I was raised to believe my family protected me, which is why it took so long to realize they were actually managing me, shaping my life in ways that felt like love until the moment I noticed none of my big choices were ever really mine. My boyfriend didn't just meet my family early. He was chosen, vetted in quiet conversations I wasn't part of, encouraged at every turn by my mother, who praised him too eagerly and defended him whenever we fought. And the longer we stayed together, the more pressure there was to settle, to move in, to stop questioning why every argument ended with me apologizing even when I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I started noticing patterns I couldn't unsee, like how my mom always knew what he'd say before he said it, how she'd warn me not to bring up certain topics with him, how family dinners felt less like gatherings and more like performance reviews, where I was being evaluated on how well I played my role. When I finally confronted him about it, he didn't deny it or get angry. He just looked tired and told me my mom had approached him early in our relationship and explained that I was difficult, that I needed stability more than passion, and that if he wanted to stay with me, he'd need to follow certain boundaries she set to keep me grounded. I told myself that was manipulation until he admitted she'd made it clear that leaving me wasn't an option either, because appearances mattered, and the family had already invested too much in the idea of us. And the worst part wasn't that he agreed, but that he said he thought I'd be grateful one day. That night, my mom asked me to sit down and calmly explained that love isn't about what you want, it's about what works. And as she talked, I realized every major relationship I'd ever had fit the same pattern with different faces, different men, the same quiet guidance behind the scenes. And just as I was about to ask how long this had been going on, she smiled and said it was time I met the person she'd already chosen for me next. By the time my mother finished explaining everything, I realized the most disturbing part wasn't what she was saying. It was how reasonable she made it sound, like she was discussing finances or meal planning instead of the slow, careful takeover of my entire adult life. She told me she'd always known I needed structure, that I was emotional, impulsive, too easily influenced by passion, and that letting me choose freely would have led to instability, heartbreak, and embarrassment for the family. She said she wasn't controlling me, she was protecting me from myself, and that every decision she'd ever made was based on patterns she'd observed since I was a child, patterns I was apparently too blind to see. When I asked why she didn't just tell me any of this sooner, she said people don't cooperate when they believe they have autonomy, and that the illusion of choice was kinder than the truth. I looked at my boyfriend differently after that, not as a villain, but as a participant, someone who'd agreed to play a role for comfort and approval instead of love. And when I asked him why he stayed, he admitted that the arrangement made his life easier, that expectations were clear, conflict was managed for him, and that he never had to deal with the unpredictability that came with real intimacy. He said he thought he was helping me, that he believed my mother when she said I needed consistency more than excitement, and hearing that made something inside me finally snap, because it meant everyone involved truly believed I was the problem that needed managing. Once I started pushing back, everything changed. Conversations that used to feel warm became corrective. Compliments turned into reminders. Any sign of independence was reframed as stress or confusion. When I talked about wanting space, my mom warned me about being dramatic. When I talked about ending the relationship, she accused me of self sabotage. Even my extended family joined in, subtly reinforcing the narrative that I'd always been like this: difficult, intense, prone to bad decisions. And I realized they weren't reacting to my behavior in the present. They were reacting to a version of me they'd all agreed on long before I ever had a say. The final breaking point came when my mother calmly outlined what would happen next if I refused to cooperate. She didn't threaten me outright. She didn't need to. She reminded me of the support I'd lose, the doors that would quietly close, the way family stories get rewritten when someone steps out of line. She said independence was possible, but it would be lonely, unstable, and unnecessary, and that all I had to do to keep my life comfortable was accept the role she'd designed for me. That was when I understood that love in this family had always been conditional on obedience. I didn't leave dramatically. I didn't scream or cry or make a scene. I started by making small decisions without consulting anyone. I spent time alone. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped apologizing for feelings that didn't require forgiveness. When I finally told my boyfriend I was done, he looked genuinely shocked, like a character whose script had been taken away mid scene. And he asked me what I was supposed to do now, as if my exit had created an inconvenience rather than a consequence. My family reacted exactly how I expected. They framed my departure as a phase. They told people I was overwhelmed. They waited for me to fail so they could say they'd warned me. But the longer I stayed gone, the quieter they got. Because control only works when the person being controlled still wants approval. I stopped trying to correct their version of events and let them believe whatever made sense to them, because for the first time, I wasn't living inside their story anymore. What I learned from all of it is this: some families don't raise children, they curate them. They don't want happiness, they want predictability. They don't fear your pain, they fear your independence. And the most dangerous part isn't the manipulation itself, it's how normal it feels when you've been surrounded by it your entire life. I didn't escape because I was brave or strong or smarter than them. I escaped because I finally accepted that being labeled difficult was better than being owned.